Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen. Welcome back to another episode of Recipe from the Side of the Fridge. This is a bundle of recipes that is magnetized to the side of our fridge in our house inside. And the recipe we're going to do today is one of those recipes, handwritten on a couple of little recipe cards. This is a recipe that we first did on the channel probably 14 or 15 years ago. Yes, this channel has been around that long. And the recipe is called Welsh cakes. A little bit about the recipe. A really good friend of mine from university knew both Julie and I. He was the best man at our wedding. I was the best man at his wedding. Really good friends. His grandmother from Wales had the most fantastic Welsh accent. And she used to make these cookies and send them up to university. He'd share them with us. We'd eat them. Eventually, when we met his grandmother, we said, you know, we got to get that recipe. Can you write it out for us? And so she wrote it out on these little cards and sent us the recipe. And Julie and I have been making them ever since. I've made a couple of changes to suit my style of cooking. The first change is I use a food processor now. In the original video on the channel, you can see Julie doing it by hand, where you would work the fat into the flour by hand. Very traditional way of doing things. This is just so much faster. And not only is it faster, it gives you a much better mix. So flour in, sugar in, baking powder, and allspice, and some butter. Now the recipe as written, as it was given to us, called for shortening and margarine. Two things I don't often have in my kitchen. Vegetable shortening, I don't really have vegetable shortening in my kitchen, and margarine is another thing that I just don't keep in my kitchen. So I substituted very early on for butter. Calls for, and I put in allspice. Now, I don't know, maybe this is your first day on the internet. Maybe this is your first day on the internet. But the comment sections on the internet can be horrendous. And even 14 or 15 years ago, when we first published this recipe, the comment section was horrendous on YouTube. It was the first video. It was the first video I had ever done where I had to moderate the comment section and pull out comments, delete comments, and I almost shut down the comment section altogether. Luckily now I don't have to monitor it all that often because, you know, the video is that old. It doesn't get a lot of play anymore. But people were outraged that I would use butter because it would appear that most people today use shortening and margarine. I have to believe that, you know, at the dawn of this recipe, it would have been long before margarine or vegetable shortening was available, because they're fairly recent on the scene, that this would have been made traditionally way back with butter or lard, pig shortening, lard. The other thing that people really got down on me about was I put allspice in. There's an argument to be made that English mixed spice, that's what this is, English mixed spice, is the spice to use. Now, allspice is not a mixture, it's not a blend, it is a single berry from a tree that originally grew only in Jamaica. And it was called allspice in English because it tasted like a whole bunch of spices mixed together. But it is really only one spice. And allspice is one of the spices in this spice blend. If you're American, this is really close to pumpkin pie spice. I've never used it in here because the first time I ever had this, it was made with allspice. And so allspice is the flavor that I associate with this particular baked good. Now, the recipe calls for 1 or 2 eggs, depending on their size. These are a medium-sized egg, so I'm going to do 2 of them. And whip them up a little bit with a fork before we put them in. Recipe also calls for half a cup of currants, and in her notes she says she just shakes in what she thinks works. So I'm just going to take a handful, maybe a handful and a half. And yes, currants, in this context, currants are a raisin. They are, as you can see in the French, Corinthian raisins. Very specific grape that grew in a very specific spot that was turned into a raisin. These are the historically, going way back to like, I don't know, 70 AD, this is the first grape that humans turned into a raisin. And they've been called currants because they're Corinthian raisins for about as long as that and used in English cooking as a dried fruit. People confuse them with the fresh currant, black currant, or red currant, which is ribes, which is a completely different beast that's never used in baking in this manner. See a recipe that's calling for currants, they're asking for the raisins. But if they're making a jam or a jelly or a juice and it calls for currants, they're probably calling for black or red currants, and you get those fresh and you use them. You never find them dry. Now, next thing, I don't soak them. You want to soak them, go right ahead. I've seen people soak them in a little bit of milk, a little bit of rum, a little bit of whiskey, a little bit of other things. I don't soak my raisins anymore. So if you want to soak them to infuse flavor, go right ahead. Nothing's stopping you. But if you don't want to soak them because you're in a time pinch, you don't need to at this point. Okay, so the recipe says to add a little bit of water or milk if needed. I'm going to add in a little bit of milk because it is needed. And we just need to get this into a pliable dough that we can roll out on the countertop. Okay, so this next bit is a little bit controversial. Anytime you put the name of a country or region in front of a recipe, there's so much controversy, especially down in the comment section. So, next part, this recipe tells me to make them about 1/4 inch thick, but it's up to you, thickness to suit. So, take that to heart. Make them as thick or as thin as you want. I like them on the thinner side. After this video went live 14, 15 years ago, people really got down on us that we made them too thin. And so I thought, okay, the next time we make them, we'll thicken them up. A lot of people told us that they needed to be about double the thickness that we had done them. And you know what? I didn't like them. I didn't like them thicker. I kind of like them on the thin side. So I added too much milk, but we'll be okay. I add a little bit more flour on top and a little bit more to my bench so it doesn't stick. And we'll roll them out. Okay, so some people would say it's already thin enough. I'm going to go just a little bit thinner. It's my kitchen, my way. Okay, now I've got a cutter and let's cut them out. Now, I've got a cast iron griddle going here. I've got it on medium heat. The instructions were, and for a long time Julie and I did this because we had an electric frying pan, cook in an electric frying pan at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I know that traditionally that is not the way. They would be cooked on something like this on a stovetop. So I've got this about 350, a little bit hotter in the middle, a little bit less on the outside. That's the way cast iron works. Cast iron holds heat, but it does not heat evenly at all. So I get these off the table and onto our griddle. Now, add butter or fat or margarine, whatever fat you're using, add that if needed, if you think they're going to stick. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I'm going to take a chance today, and then you just keep adding, you add in between batches, you add a little bit more butter as needed, or a little bit more fat as needed. Okay, while the first batch is cooking, I'll re-roll to cut the second batch. It's pretty forgiving dough. You can roll and re-roll a couple of times. You could do each set a different thickness and see what thickness you like in your home. I mean, so much of cooking is personal taste. So much of cooking is doing it the way your mother or father or grandmother, family member X, has done it in the past. It's kind of what you grow up with, is what you think is the right way. That doesn't mean that the way someone else does it isn't the right way for them. So I've never timed these. Cook them just until they start to brown on the bottom side. 350 degrees is a fairly low heat, all things considered. You're probably going to go 5 minutes with this thickness before you need to turn them over. And we'll cut out the next batch. Okay, this one in the center, probably, yeah, there we go. That one needs to be turned a little warmer over here. These ones at the back haven't cooked as much yet, so I'll probably move them around. See, that one's not as... See how the electric frying pan really, really did this job fantastically. Okay, I'm going to move these around a little bit. And as I take them off the heat, I put them onto a rack to cool and sprinkle some superfine fruit sugar over top. Hey, Jules.
Hey, Glenn. Hey, friends. Welsh cakes. I am so grateful for this recipe.
Yes, it is a great recipe. I love these things.
Can I crack in already?
Yeah.
All right. I love these.
Okay.
I love these cookies. They are like sugary cookies, but they have the currants that give them that little grapey flavor to them.
Cookies, biscuits, cakes.
I don't care.
Yeah. These go by a lot of different names. There are a lot of different names. And so...
And you've made them thicker than I usually do, because I like them thin and crispy.
Yeah.
But I don't care.
This is kind of midway between. And then, so when we got this recipe, I didn't know anything about Welsh cakes. All I knew was what I had eaten and what came in the recipe. Since then, we've amassed a bit of a cookbook collection.
Yes.
And there are a lot of recipes for this that reference the Welsh cakes. But there are a ton of other variants of this across the British Isles. Scotland, England, Ireland. All essentially the same, different componentry of maybe a little bit different on the spicing, maybe not currants, but other types of raisins, peel.
Careful. Little sarcasm alert.
What?
You're saying they made it their own?
They made it their own, exactly. But people really gripped down to the one that they knew growing up, which of course you do.
I'm in. I have to be careful not to eat all of them. I'm going to sit here very patiently now and try not to eat the whole tray. We haven't had these in a long time. Thanks, Glenn.
I'm taking these on the plane with me this summer. I'm going to make these a few times this summer because these would be great.
They will travel well.
Yeah.
Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you again soon.